NFL picks next on the Michael Welch podcast.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that.
Thursday Night Football will be huge rematch of Kansas City and Baltimore. Can't wait for that one. Hard to root against the Kansas City Chiefs in that one. That will be just top shelf television right off the rip there. The NFC East, Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, and Giants. Sorted to the top, of course, Eagles and Cowboys, and towards the bottom, the Commanders and the Giants. I think the Giants will be a dumpster fire this year. Personally, the Giants, of course, signed up for the Daniel Jones Hall. Wrong Jones there. Jones Hall for now, who sometimes just looks better running the football and hauling ass than he does throwing it. But tucked in for long haul there. No Saquon Barkley. Devin Singletary in there instead. That doesn't look too promising. Darius Slayton, Dewally Robinson, Jalen Hyatt are your receivers. Malik Neighbors in there, of course, too. So rookie wide receivers looking to make a big impact. Not so sure about that. Hyatt, of course, one of the big play guys for Tennessee, over 16 yards per catch. But Daniel Jones is the quarterback. Just not sure how that's going to look for the Giants. Rebuilding the offensive line. Gave up 85 sacks last year. They did have Kayvon Thibodeau, who had 11.5 sacks last year. Traded for Brian Burns, of course, on the defensive end. But those are probably your best two impact players on the defensive end. Just not super excited about the Giants at all. Commanders I could see pushing for a playoff spot, but don't like their defense a whole lot either. The defensive line might be okay. Bobby Wagner's coming in to save the linebacker core for right now and be a leader on the defense. Just probably not a great sign. They were dead last in 2023. Not a good group there. Offensive line gave up 65 sacks last season. Just going to be a rough time for the Commanders. Looks like a team that the last few years has had pieces, but just can't quite get there. If Jaden Daniels is a real star, then, if some other pieces slide into place, they could certainly be in contention for a playoff spot. I would love to see it. I'd love to see Jaden Daniels succeed, especially because the first few years in college and Arizona State, he looked good for a season there. He came in 2020, and of course, that was all dysfunctional. Transferred over to LSU, didn't look so great as a thrower originally. Of course, ended up winning the Heisman, so it'd be great to see him kind of succeed and excel coming in. But they have a bunch of pieces they need to figure out there for the Commanders. Austin Eckler in at running back joins Brian Robinson. Terry McLaurin, underrated. Never had a super great quarterback thrown to him there. 1,000 yards last year. Dotson, of course. So they have some pieces. They just need a quarterback that can kind of fire him up. Not sure that it's a whole lot different than what he had going at LSU, quite frankly. So I do not have them contending for, I do not have them in a playoff spot, but they were under consideration. I have the Eagles winning the division. I have the Cowboys coming in second. Now the Eagles, of course, tanking 1-6 in the final 7 games to end the season. Did not make the playoffs. Terrible there. Kellen Moore came in as offensive coordinator. Left the Cowboys there. We had a replacement of coordinators and a whole swap sesh. Of course, we saw all the problems that they had after replacing guys in 2022 and the effect in 2023 of picking poor guys to man the play calling on both sides of the football as we got later into the season. But hopefully we've got some good choices here because they do still have good quality players. Saquon Barkley, then moving over from the Giants, of course, giving them another high impact player there. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, a great 2-player combination at the receiver position. Offensive line loses some guys, but it's still one of the better units. Good on both sides of the trenches, even though they lost Kelsey at center. Fletcher Cox, Hassan Reddick is gone to the Jets, but they still have high impact players there, led by the interior lineman, of course, Jalen Carter, the big man from Georgia, who they got their hands on, which is kind of surprising. Retooling the linebacker core. Secondary gave up 35 passing touchdowns last season, which is the most in the league. But again, retooling a number of different areas and coordinator changes will make a big deal, and they still have a ton of talent. It was, of course, damning as we all watched them fall apart at the end of last year. I have them winning the division then this season. Cowboys are interesting, right? Coaching staff, contracts not renewed. They're on the last year here. Not sure it's going to happen moving forward. We still have Dakin. Whatever you think of that, I think he's a solid performer. But it is what it is. He still needs some support to kind of move forward. CD Lamb, new contract, but, some Jerry Jones back and forth about how valuable he really was. Brandon Cooks, I still think, is a good receiver, but he's getting a little bit older, and it just seems like a big drop-off from Lamb to Cooks. They went back to the well with Ezekiel Elliott at running back, which seems a little iffy. And, of course, the offensive line, one of the best in the whole league, lost Tyron Smith and Tyler Biadasz. I'm not going to pronounce that correctly. Good thing you don't come here for my pronunciations. So a downgrade really overall in talent, particularly on the offensive side, I would say. Micah Parsons is still going to man the defense, of course. We're still going to have Eric Kendricks brought back in to boost the linebacker group. But it's going to be very interesting to see how productive they really are, what the coaching staff is, if there's any variance in what they're doing there. Are they kind of coaching out the season if things aren't going as well? This is a team that constantly wins 10-plus games, 12-plus games. So what's going to happen kind of moving forward? Secondary should be a pretty good group, but this team just can't win the playoffs, as we all know. But I have Eagles winning, Cowboys coming in second. And moving to the NFC North, I have 3 teams here. Lions, Packers, Bears, with the Vikings finished last. Of course, the Vikings, with some continuity there, I think have a chance to move up. We could move a whole bunch of teams around here. I think there's a lot of parity in the league this year, and a lot of teams just within division pods could move up or down. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens moving forward. The Lions I have as winning the division. Make a few clear replacements. A big upgrade in defensive tackle DJ Reader to that defensive line. A running back duo Gibbs and Montgomery, of course, still plugged in there. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Would really be nice to have a step forward from Jameson Williams to kind of help the wide receiver core. Still need a big performance from Jared Goff, who's been solid where he's at. One of the biggest career turnarounds ever. You thought after year 1 in Los Angeles with Jeff Fisher, that he was not, his career is going to be over real quick. And he's still plugging along. Looks like a really good quarterback. Sam Laporte was a good hit last year. Defensive line is one of the best defensive ends in Aiden Hutchinson. They could really use another defensive end that's productive on the other side. Elite pressure rate for Hutchinson, though. Linebackers aren't necessarily strength, but not a weakness. Secondary has been reloaded. They need some bodies to kind of step up there. For that group, Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rickshaw Jr. Plugging in there. They just have to be better than one of the last pass defenses, 27th ranked pass defense in the entire NFL. Just take a few steps forward, as this has been a very linear group growing and moving forward. Just a few weaknesses. Would like another pass rusher, would like a few bodies in the secondary, and would really like a number 2 option to really solidify, even though you could say Laporte's basically there. But really, if you want on the Super Bowl, that's kind of what you want from the Detroit Lions. They also have the best offensive line in the game. Packers, 2-5 to 7-3 finish. 10-7 overall last season, of course. Love looked great. 37-11 touchdown to interception ratio. Now, of course, we're expecting the wide receiver group that stepped up last season to really produce. And it's kind of looking like it's possible that it's going to look like the Aaron Rodgers years, where you're always rotating bodies up from Adams to Cobb, just always having top guys kind of circle up. The trio right now looks like Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, Devarian Wicks possibly as well. As various guys got hurt, body stepped up. This looks like he could have a nice group. Even if he had a couple top guys emerge out of that quartet, they'd be really, really solid. But all four look to have some promise, certainly, and are already looking like, really good receivers. Josh Jacobs in at running back. Aaron Jones leaves, so that's a really good back to have in there as well. 4/5 of a top 10 offensive line is back as well, so you can't complain about any of that. Jordan Love hopefully continuing a linear progression upwards. Switching to a 4-3 defense, that's more comfortable for me to look at. Certainly the defensive line, 20th against the rush defense, not a whole lot of surprise there. But stopping some of the big plays, top pass defense in 2023, which is what really matters as long as you can stop the critical plays when you have to. So switching things around there to kind of accommodate that and a new defensive coordinator. I kind of like that for the Packers. So I have them finishing second in the division, just behind the Lions, who have a little bit more time together and sure things going on that roster, especially on the offensive side, and they're not switching schemes either. I do like Chicago to slide into my last playoff spot, the 7th seed, because I like their defense more than other teams. Montez Sweat, of course, slid in there last season and helped nearly pilot them to the playoffs. They were about a game away there if they didn't blow a lead in one of those games towards the end of the season there. The pass defense was 25th, but they were number 1 in the league in forced interceptions. So presumably the pass defense is not as bad. Turnover percentages probably come down a bit. Probably don't force quite as many turnovers. Jalen Johnson's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So defense is going to be better than like Washington, going to be better than some of these NFC South teams that are icky. And there's going to be, Seattle Rams, some of those teams in the hunt as well. But I like the defense of the Bears more. They started to come along last season. I still don't always know what the offensive schemes are doing sometimes for the Bears. I've watched different breakdowns and analysis of that kind of stuff, but I don't always know what they're doing as far as calling plays and spacing and that. But Caleb Williams is in, a couple veteran wide receivers there, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen. Rome Oduzzi should be awesome from Washington, even if it takes a few games to break him in. Nice rookie quarterback, wide receiver to build together there. The trenches are going to be the weakness for the team, unfortunately. The defensive line especially. Offensive line might turn out to be okay. They also have to block for a mobile quarterback. Some of that can be a little different. They did have Justin Fields last year, but Caleb Williams just isn't quite the same as Fields. I don't think they quite run the same. I don't think they're going to operate quite the same. It's just you have to get used to blocking for your quarterback when they can move out of the pocket, keep plays alive, or run downfield. Fields just evacuated last season, and Williams, I think, is going to be running around extending plays. You have to learn to block for a quarterback like that, and that he helps negate a poor or below average offensive line in general in broad terms, but they're also going to have to learn to block appropriately when he's throwing the ball and getting around back there. Swift helps bring up the running back core. I just like this team to win a bunch of games and be really exciting moving forward. I've loved Caleb Williams since he stepped foot on the in the college landscape. So excited to see him succeed. Too bad he had to go to a division rival of the mighty Detroit Lions. Vikings could be interesting. Too bad JJ McCarthy is out. Aaron Jones in at running back. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison has some problems with a traffic incident. Sam Darnold has won games and has experience, obviously. Some new pass rushers on the defense. It's not been a great group there. Secondary was not very good. New kicker. It's going to be tough slope for them. A great quarterback in there, at least from some of the throws he's making by JJ would have been better than, of course, Sam Darnold. But we'll see what they can do. I think they'll win a few games. I don't know if they'll be a bottom 5 team in the league, bottom 10 certainly, but there are a lot of candidates for some of the worst. So heading to the NFC South, I think the Panthers could be right down there again. There's lines of thinking that continuing to play Bryce Young behind such a putrid offense last season was actually detrimental to his development. Miles Sanders is in. He's not terribly exciting. Deontay Johnson comes in, the former Steeler. Xavier Leggett, besides his fun accent, could be a productive receiver there out of South Carolina. Adam Thielen was pretty good last year. Offensive line has Taylor Moton and not much else, so not sure what's going to happen there. Yeah, average if you're lucky, otherwise below average to poor offensive unit overall, I would say. Defense last year couldn't force turnovers, couldn't sack anybody, just wasn't super great. No surprises there. Ashawn Robinson and Derek Brown was a great defensive line duo that brings something to the table. Shaq Thompson back from injury at linebacker, missed all of last season. Stephon Gilmore joins the secondary to give them a little bit of juice. So that should be the strength, maybe a strong side of the ball. It is possible this Panthers team starts to round out a little bit, particularly because the rest of the division I don't think is super scary. The Saints, again, just seem like a very plodding team. They just don't seem very exciting. Alvin Kamara doesn't seem like he's going to take another step forward. He's been slowing down. Chris Olave is fine. He hasn't been a super big weapon so far. Rashad Sheed at receiver. Spencer Rattler could take over a quarterback at some point. Seems like Derek Carr is not very well liked in Saints land and isn't very, very exciting. And I don't have really anything exciting to say about the defense, which is effective at times, but also play 6 games against the rest of this division. The Buccaneers won it last year. A nice home for Mr. Baker Mayfield, who's very productive last season and has 2 great receiving targets still. Mike Evans, 13 touchdowns last season. Chris Godwin still around. The run game has not been exciting. Chase Edmonds, Rachaad White, they're not very good. Bucky Irving from Oregon was brought in, smaller back. I'd like to see him get in the mix there, even though he's a much smaller guy. Offensive line had a few changes. Defensive line, Will Golston, Vita Vea is back. Longtime playmakers Devontae White and Levante David are gone now, so newer faces in the mix there. Winfield Jr. and Jordan Whitefield into the mix in the secondary. So this team seems like they're at neutral, maybe a step back at best. They did win a playoff game last year. Again, that offense seems pretty potent. Not sure about the defensive side of things. The Falcons, of course, made the bigger moves. Cousins coming back from injury. Michael Penix checking in as well. Seems like they should have at least one quarterback option there that can do some damage. Bijan Robinson was not capitalized last season. Coaching change should hopefully see some offensive change. It sure seems like Drake London, Kyle Pitts. They did add Darnell Mooney. A lot of underutilized offensive players that should hopefully do a lot better in this system. Defense had troubles again with sacks, turnovers in 2023. Grady Jack does return on that defensive line. That should be really great. And I just think that they're going to be the more well-rounded team out of everyone here. Shockingly, the best quarterback in this division, like if you're power ranking them, like who's the best quarterback in this division? And at what point do you start looking at the rookies like Michael Penix and Spencer Rattler? If you're just guessing here, because Bryce Young, Derek Carr, and Kirk Cousins coming off injury, who knows where they're going to place. Just thinking out of 6 possible quarterbacks that could start this year, Bryce Young for the Panthers, Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler for the Saints, Penix and Cousins for the Falcons, and then our former Heisman winner there for the Bucks. Like if you're power ranking all these guys, it's just a sad sack of affairs. And if you're projecting by the end of the season, like, is it possible that Spencer Rattler does take over in Saints land and he's like the second best quarterback out of all those to play by the end of the year? I mean, that's just crazy to kind of wrap your head around. But I have the Falcons winning the South and no one else making it there. I have Bucks in second, Saints in third, Panthers in fourth in the South. The West is very interesting. I do have the only team making is the 49ers. That shouldn't be too surprising. Probably the best all-around team in football. Not a whole lot to say about this squad. Brock Purdy, no longer a weakness, right? A lot can be argued that he never was a weakness. He's been a strength since he came in. Experience may be an issue initially, when he only played a handful of games and was in the playoffs in his first season there. They re-signed Ayuk. They're just loaded again. I'm looking for a defensive end opposite Bosa has been one of the key things. Leonard Floyd coming in for that spot, but overall just a hot unit here, ready to do some damage. The Cardinals seemed well coached last year. Faded down the stretch, certainly only won 4 or 5 games. They've got Kyler Murray back in the fold. He played 8 games overall last season. So John Glennon's got things, hopefully back in going there. James Conner back in. Michael Carter coming in at running back. James Carter's still been super effective. The receivers are not exciting. A lot expected from Marvin Harrison, who didn't play much in the preseason at all, didn't do much NFL drills or anything like that. He's just basically been off the field since the end of the regular season pretty much for the Big Ten participants there for Ohio State. Trey McBride, good tight end there, but just nothing super pops off for the offense necessarily right now. The 13th ranked pass defense returns Buda Baker again, Jalen Thompson. Overall, the defense is ranked 30th though, and they're just bringing in new pieces there. So a rebuild is still very much underway there. The Rams, if you remember going into last season, is Sam Darnold going to retire? Can Stafford retire or recover from a thumb injury? Is Sean McVay going to retire? Then Cooper Kupp got hurt, so is he going to recover from injury? And then are all these young pieces, undrafted free agents that were brought in, like how are they going to perform? And everyone came in, everyone ended up healthy by the end of the year. They made a playoff run. It was super fun, awesome, great. Now Sam Darnold's gone. McVay still seems hyped up. Stafford's getting older. Kupp's getting older. They did find Puka Nacua to help supplement that offense. They may have found some other assets on the offense as well. One of them being Kyron Williams. They also brought in Blake Corum from Michigan as well. Kyron Williams was pretty banged up last season though, but one of the leading rushers in the league. So we'll see about that. Offensive line might have some issues and that could cause problems to the rest of the units. But overall, between the injury-prone guys, the young players, last season seems like a real outlier, although McVay has got to be credited as one of the best, and an argument could be made for the best coach in the entire league. So you certainly got to credit that. The defense is going to be young still, though. Bringing in guys and relying on guys like Kobe Turner, who had 9 sacks last season as a rookie, to account for Darnold's absence. But I'm not sure that they're going to just continue to move up and onward this season. And then, of course, we have the Seahawks. Geno Smith still there. Recovering running backs. Kenneth Walker back in the fold. Zach Cabernet did pretty well from UCLA in his rookie year there in his absence. Tyler Lockett's starting to get banged up. Jackson Smith-Njigba is checking in as well in his second season. DK Metcalf still looks great. So really a great trio of wide receivers there. Some great running backs, but health has been an issue. If they are all healthy, it gives you a number of options. Geno Smith, although not the best quarterback in the division, certainly has been an above average performer. The offensive line looks bad. Banged up last season. Some younger guys coming in could see 60% of the guys replaced from last year. That could cause a number of issues. But as we've seen, great skill position players can sometimes roll away from troublesome offensive line spots. They just can't be horrible. They could be average. They just can't be turnstiles. And in the ground game, they have to be able to get some push so you can move the football. As it turns out, negotiating all these teams, and I'd love to be able to push Arizona up a bit, but I ultimately just went with the 49ers to make the playoffs here. Seattle I left out, but they were on the bubble. But ultimately, again, I pushed Chicago ahead. A little bit more solidity. Is that a word? I like the team a little bit more, the roster, all the way around there, although the ceilings may be brought down a little bit more. The explosive offense of Seattle is certainly better there. So, my seeds in the NFC then. My 1 is the 49ers. My 2 is the Lions. 3 is the Eagles. 4 is the Falcons. 5 is the Packers. 6 is the Cowboys. And 7 is the Chicago Bears. In the AFC, let's start in the East. Bills, Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots. One of these is not like the other, and for once, it's the team that has obviously won a handful of Super Bowls, and that is the New England Patriots. Now, Bills, Dolphins, and of course the, goodness gracious, the Jets. Who knows who finishes at the top of this division? I went with the Jets. I think Aaron Rodgers coming back is a big deal. I think the fact that, depending on your lens, the fact that this team won as many games as it did last year was such horrible quarterback play and offensive line play in combination with that is amazing. And just bringing in a competent quarterback and reshuffling around 3 new pieces on that offensive line, just upgrading that is a significant deal. Breece Hall, of course, back there, great running back, did a good job despite the circumstances. We all know about Garrett Wilson. Mike Williams was added. We need him to be healthy, of course. Offensive line could be a solid group with the additions. Hassan Reddick is still holding out as I'm recording this, but he'll be great on the defensive line. Still have Quinn Williams there. D-line, along with some depth, should be really good. Will McDonald, I like a lot from Iowa State. The rookie added there. A couple other picks to be melded in there as well. Quincy Williams, CJ Mosley, the linebacker crew. Secondary is good with Sauce and should have pretty good depth there as well. So I'd like the Jets to pull out of this sucker with the win. I do have the Dolphins finishing second. Number 1 offense last year finishes largely the same. A-Chain will take over more of the lead carries, you would think. Most are still in the mix there at the running back position, of course. Tua will always be questioned, but his targets, Waddle and Hill, will not be. Odell Beckham Jr. was actually added too for a little depth, and a couple other pieces that may be there as well. We'll see about that. Odell Beckham Jr., of course, did nothing for the Ravens, really, last season, but a good group of weapons. Should be a high-powered offense again. Offensive line still doesn't look particularly promising, but that didn't affect them for the most part last season. And playoff plays is the big thing. They were 10th in defense. Switches to Anthony Wither at defensive coordinator. All defensive line's still going to be soft. The returning linebackers, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips from injury to boost that group. Load up in the secondary. Jordan Poyer is coming over from the Bills. So that'll be a better group over there. And this could still be a really, really good football team. But again, the emphasis is going to very much be put on the quarterback position. Still, the offensive line group is important, and we'll see about the defense. But really good units on both sides of the ball for the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Bills. Although they lost a number of pieces, still have one of the best quarterbacks in the game. Not sure that it matters who he's throwing the ball to, because, of course, Stephon Diggs, as he noted on his exit interview, had some not so great times there in his last year. It wasn't a great part of the game plan either. Gabe Davis also exits. They brought in Curtis Samuel, Chase Claypool, Keon Coleman should be a nice piece, Dalton Kincaid. So I think the receiving core is still going to be fun. Although top Stephon Diggs is another level. I still liked Gabe Davis, but still some weapons there. Just not sure that this group is going to have the ceiling that some other squads do. Trenches, I think, are still going to be pretty solid, but they've had to make some cap moves here. Great, particularly in the back end. Safety position of strength, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are replaced, of course. One of them going over to the Dolphins. But they still should be pretty good throughout. The top linebacking core is led by Matt Milano. And I think they still have some playmakers. Well, they do still have some playmakers there. No doubt about that. It's whether they're improved from last season. And again, tough playoff exits to the Kansas City Chiefs really stand out in the last few years. And how much are some of these exits or some of these, guys coming into key roles, are they really going to be able to maintain the production and what's needed to to win here and possibly advance in the playoffs. So I have, again, Jets, Dolphins, Bills I'm putting third with some of those exits. I still like what the Dolphins can do. And the Jets, I think, are really, really good. Pats, I don't think are very good at all. Drake May and a couple of rookie wide receivers, Polk and Baker, Javon Baker, might be the top receiving core there, top offensive producers by the end of the season. And you still have Ramon Stevenson, who was banged up at the end of the last year as well. He'll be taking, bulk of the offense, I imagine, with handoffs there. Of course, they'll have to throw the ball if they're behind. Not sure about the offensive line. Defense was number 7 overall last year. Still had problems, though. Couldn't get sacks, couldn't force turnovers. They're 28th in turnover differential overall. It still should be a pretty solid unit, but they're going to have to work some magic on the offensive end and then avoid injuries and just, they were awful last year, and it's going to take some magic for them to not be a dumpster fire bottom 5 team probably this season. With the strength of this division, that's obviously going to be a tough call, especially with the new coach there in OJ Mayo. The North is another tough one. I have Ravens, Browns, Pittsburgh, and I have Bengals bottoming out in this division. Ravens, of course, Lamar Jackson, criminally still underrated despite 2 MVPs, despite a unique skill set, despite really not having a top flight receiving core in his entire career here. He has a real target now in Zay Flowers going into his second year. Mark Andrews is back, and a lot of question marks after that, quite frankly, even with returning producers. Derrick Henry in at running back, and the depth after that, Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, who was productive before he was banged up and lost for the year, the undrafted free agent rookie last season. So let's hope Derrick Henry continues to be productive and healthy, although you'd imagine I'd like some diversity and to mix in a number of different carries to help keep him healthy, but that could be a very, very fun group of guys to watch run the football. Offensive line should have 3 new starters in, should have some depth, some rookies coming in. Again, we'll need some really linear progression, need some actual step forward, I think, not just a sure thing strength there. Elvis Dumar, 13 sacks last season, anchors the number 8 defensive front from all of last season. Raekwon Smith, Kyle Van Noy, still there to lead the linebacker crew. Kyle Hamilton made All-Pro and Pro Bowl last season. Still leads a top flight secondary, so still like the defense overall and what they will bring to the table. Offensive line a little rejuggling. His brother, Harbaugh's brother, swiped his 2 running backs when he came over to the Chargers, but they picked up Derrick Henry. Lamar's in. Still love the guy. Would like to see them advance in the playoffs. I still have them winning this division, but again, it's going to be all over the place. I actually have the Browns number 2. It's not because of Deshaun Watson. It's in spite of him. They're still winning despite his poor play. They did bring in Jameis Winston, which makes it seriously look like they're going to consider moving Winston into the lineup. If Watson struggles there, he's got 2 years left of his guarantee monster money, but that doesn't just mean that they're going to suffer through, right? And pay him and force him onto the field anymore. I don't think that's going to happen. Stefanski, I like him as a coach, but things haven't always gone his way with the front office, I don't think. I'm not sure that he was begging for Watson. I don't recall him saying, can't wait to get my hands on the guy. But here we are. He's going to have another option at quarterback at least. Some variability in Watson. But at least you have another guy to play there. Chubb's going to be out for at least a month. I believe it's still 4 weeks on the PUP with designation to return. Maybe it's 5 weeks. Not sure what it is with the extended schedule now. Ford isn't particularly exciting at running back, but they'll have a couple other options to go with there. Offensive line looks solid. They have receiving options. Jared Jeudy is added to Amari Cooper and David Njoku, who, if you remember, they signed to a contract extension 3 years ago. 3 seasons ago, was it already? Yeah, maybe it was 2 seasons ago. And it was kind of questionable as to why. I believe Austin Hooper was still there. And Njoku just wasn't really in the mix. He'd already been on the roster a couple of years, and he said he wanted out, and the Browns came back to him and said, we're going to keep you in the mix. We want you here. And there's a lot of potential talk about what he could contribute, and he just wasn't part of the game plan. And finally, last year, they got him in the mix after several seasons and conflict and contract extension, and now finally all on the same page, and he should be even more of a contributor this season at tight end, hopefully. Most of the secondary last season was banged up at one time or another. They should be back to form a solid group. Of course, Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett, forms a solid defensive front seven there. Zadarius Smith looks like a good bookend to him. Just looks like a good all-around defensive unit. If they could find a reliable, or at least average quarterback play at the very least, this should be a team that can compete for the division. Stay right in the thick of things here. Steelers, boy. Russell looks like the starter right now. Justin Fields, I would love to see play, but man, my hope for his development is really wavering, as I think most folks are that are fans of his. 2 quarterback options, though, and it's possible that neither are going to really push the team forward. As we know, the Steelers continue to make the playoffs regardless. Winning records for Mike Tomlinson. Receiving depth isn't great. George Pickens is the clear number 1, but they seem to develop guys regardless. Jaylen Warren looks like the better back than Harris right now. Offensive line's rebuilding, though. That's not always the case. So if they can't figure some of the other stuff out, it might be a very average offense at best. The defensive end still has playmakers. TJ Watt's back from injury, which was a problem, obviously, last year. Cam Hayward. Patrick Queen was signed up. Secondary had Joey Porter really emerge last year, coming in, dad's namesake, Penn State, drafted in, performed really well. We had Mika Fitzpatrick, who didn't have a turnover for the first time in his career in a season last year, and they had to move him around a little bit, and he should be solidified at his normal position back there. So we should have some guys in really, really impactful spots to do damage for Pittsburgh, and they'll again be competing for a playoff spot. I just can't pick them for that right now. And fourth, it's tough because some folks are going to pick the Bengals and expect results from this group, and I love Joe Burrow, but he's got a weird wrist injury he's coming back from. The offensive line, which they've been rebuilding since he was literally drafted, is going to be an average group, hopefully, across the line. And that's if there's no weak spots that other teams can exploit, like the Ravens or the Browns or the Steelers, which is a reoccurring issue. The running backs, Zach Moss and Chase Brown, I don't think that's very exciting. You've got your wide receivers there. T. Higgins, of course, and Chase, very exciting. That's great. DJ Reader, you lose from the defensive line, and Josh Tapua. You don't come here for my pronunciations. And so the trenches are questionable. I think that's a problem. Secondary seems to be rebuilding. Number 31 in defense last season is not going to make great leaps. So I think this team could have real problems. Joe Burrow can't stay healthy. I don't want any of that to happen. I want to see him throw the football. I want to see him score points. I want to see the offensive line doesn't have to be elite, just has to be good enough. I want to see Zach Moss make some big plays. I want to see the defense make just enough stops, put a little pressure on, break up a few throws, and do just enough. Not get crushed in the run game and bled out. Lose the possession battle every game. But I think some of these other teams are a little bit better set up. So I actually have them finishing fourth in that division. Coming up, the South. This one, I have not a lot of faith in these squads. But the Texans, of course, +7 wins last year. CJ's awesome. Mixon joins the running back room there. They try to get a lot of different guys in there, including Derrick Henry and all the names in the market. Aaron Jones, I think. Of course, we had like a dozen running backs change teams. Eckler, Dobbs. But they ended up with Mixon. Fine. He hasn't been particularly impressive, but he's been running behind that offensive line over there with the Bengals. So I think he'll be just fine here. with the Texans. Tunsil's still over here anchoring a solid offensive line. Diggs should be much happier here with Tank Dell, Nico Collins. He's already been offered. He's a captain here. They have 8 captains. That seems like a whole lot. I've seen some teams have 6 or fewer. 8 seems like a lot of captains, especially for a young team. Hope that doesn't delude some of the voices in the room. Seems like they have some depth at the receiver position and just some depth on the offensive side, some playmakers. So as long as CJ continues to be productive, which I think he will, then they can really do some things. Defensive line looks elite. Will Anderson Jr. is also captain. He was in his rookie year. He's just a smash hit there. They really knocked it out of the park, moving up and grabbing two top 5 picks in a row there with CJ and Will Anderson. Secondary looks pretty deep and pretty loaded. Derek Stinley Jr., one of the top guys there out of LSU. Jeff Okudah back there, CJ Henderson, Desmond King. A couple of them are retreads from former teams, but looks like they should have a good group back there, be able to create problems for receivers, to create a pass rush, and to not be killed in the ground game. So they look like a really good team. They're a trendy pick for the Super Bowl, and it's because they don't have any clear weakness, and they have quite a few strengths. The Jaguars, I'm not quite sure how to feel about. I don't feel strongly that they're a team that's just going to win a bunch of games and make it to the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence has had multiple injuries last season. He has never been in the conversation for one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Travis Etienne is still there, really good running back. They added Gabe Davis, rookie Brian Thomas Jr. Such a simple name to stumble over there. Is added to the fold. Christian Kirk should be back after missing a handful of games due to a core injury, which generally sound pretty serious. But he should have a nice receiving core. Never been super excited about the offensive line, but it should be an okay group, so they should be able to do some damage there with the offense. New defensive coordinator Ryan Nelson came in, though. Cut the whole secondary, basically, moving things around. They're 22nd defense last season, so it makes sense to make some changes. They were 9th against the rush, though. They do need to force some turnovers and fix that turnover differential margin problem that they had, just turning the ball over too much, not forcing turnovers. So I just don't know what to expect when you completely change around the defense and you seem to stock up on the offensive side and be good there. I expect this team to be over 500 and pushing for a playoff spot. But again, Trevor Lawrence in his time here, it's just never felt like this has been a truly dangerous team. And again, it just doesn't quite feel like that. Colts. Anthony Richardson's played 17 games in college and the pros, 17 games since he was in high school. And quite frankly, I bet you that those numbers are even a little funky because it was around 2020, I think, when his high school year. So I bet you those numbers might be a little weird too. We don't know that he's a great passer. I mean, he isn't so far. He can run the football. He's dangerous there, especially in goal line situations. Pittman, we think, is a star. I'm not so sure that he's like a dominant number one. Adonai Mitchell from Texas is coming in. I think he'll be a solid contributor, but I'm just not sure about the skill guys there in relation to the rest of the league. Jonathan Taylor is primed to increase his 7 touchdowns from last season and be more productive like he was a couple years back and be fully healthy. And the offensive offense is kind of built to be more conductive to Richardson running the ball and Taylor as well. But will they have the higher ceiling on the offensive end, or will they have a lower floor? It's just really hard to see. Offense or defensively on the other end, secondary doesn't seem particularly threatening. They do have DeForest Buckner still there, of course. Samson Ebukam looks pretty good. Zaire Franklin at the linebacker spot is a key player. So the front 7 looks better than the back end. I'm just not super high on the Colts. And of course the Titans. I'm not sold on the quarterback position. I'm not sold on Tony Pollard at the running back position. They have a collection of receivers that would have been good 3 years ago, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley. I'm not sold on the trenches, the defense. I'm going to have to, I don't even know who here is supposed to be really stepping up to be a productive contributor like 2 years from now. This team could come together and be a little bit scary, but scary as in they might win 7 games instead of 3. So I don't have high expectations for the Titans. So again, Texans I have making the playoffs, and then I have Jags missing, and then the Colts and Titans coming in 3rd and 4th in the division. Finally, in the West, Chiefs are number 1, obviously. 18 starters back altogether. I believe they're retooling the tackle positions again. At least one tackle spot. Receivers look okay to me. Rashad Rice has obviously got to face some legal problems, but it seems unsure if he'll face those repercussions this season or next. He seems like a slightly above average receiver. Xavier Worthy, I like, even if he's not productive early in the season. He doesn't need to be. Travis Kelce seems like he could be in his last couple years, still productive, even in small spurts, and he still can be a full game monster. So Marquise Brown, not sure what to make of him at all. He could be like an OBJ type where he's not productive at all on this team. But those haven't been the problems. They're still winning Super Bowls without contributors, but it seems like they've upped the wide receiver room. Chris Jones is still an impact player. George Karthalis, I'm not going to pronounce that right either, the former Purdue Boilermaker. I knew he was a steal when they grabbed him a couple of years back in the draft, and he's been a high impact player for them as well. Built at the secondary, built at linebacker, seemed pretty good. Very few question spots, and they're elite at several areas. So the Chiefs obviously have winning this, no surprise there. I have the Chargers finishing 2nd. Obviously built in the Harbaugh image here is Jim Harbaugh stole his brother's running backs and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and let Eckler go. And just definitely they'll be leading in that direction. Of course, spent a high draft pick on the offensive line and not in the receiver room. A number of new receivers coming in. That's not going to be a strength, probably below average at that position, with Palmer being the only guy that has a lot of reps in with Herbert. So it seems like he's going to be a guy that catches a lot of balls initially, although Will Disley and Hayden Hurst, as we know, have been spot guys on their former respective teams, and we may see some more dual tight end sets, so we may see some more action for those guys, but leaning into the ground game more with Edwards and Dobbins and a strong offensive line as they're being well coached and rebuilt there in the Harbaugh image. And Herbert, when you do want to throw the ball, hey, Herbert can wing it. So some things can go wrong here, obviously, but it looks like they are going to be trending in the right direction, especially with Harbaugh's record. Some youth is being infused into the 3-4 front. I don't like looking at these, particularly trying to figure out how effective the 3-4 fronts are in the NFL, because they bleed statistics into how productive they are on the field. But they're boosting that 3-4 front. Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa are looking long in the tooth, but they're back in to fuel up that front 7. Probably the best linebacker group in the league. Secondary should be pretty solid as well. And sticking with that 3-4 front, at least for this season, we'll see how effective they can be, but it should be a solid defensive unit. And I just think that they have an opportunity to make the playoffs, particularly because I don't think Denver's very good. So I think the Raiders are going to finish 3rd. Minshew's starting at quarterback there. Tough when you know you're not going to have a really high ceiling quarterback to begin with, but Minshew's obviously there. Devontae Adams sure seems frustrated, even though he is constantly putting out reports that he's not frustrated. That's frustrating. And Michael Gallup is in there. Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers is coming in, so it seems like they have some depth to play with. But, you know, when he's going between Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, who knows? Zamir White's taking over the starting position at running back. He seems like he'll be really effective. Offensive line seems okay. Certainly not a dumpster fire like some teams are. So they may be able to get some things going on offense, but the quarterback position could be in the undoing there. And if no one really emerges as a strong weapon outside of Devontae Adams, then it looks like they could really be limited Max Crosby leads what should be a pretty good defensive line. Malcolm Kuntz looks like a pretty good bookend to him. They have some depth at cornerback, 2 clear starters, Nate Hobbs and Jack Jones, but it looks like the defensive unit in broad strokes should be pretty decent. Generate a pass rush, stop a pass, not bleed in the run game. So really, if this team had a quarterback, it might be an all right squad. Requires a lot of things to not fall apart, but they have holes, but this doesn't seem like a disaster team. So it's not improbable that they were to make a playoff run either, possibly bump the Chargers out, or if this division was somehow to get 3 teams and some other squads in this conference struggle. It's not out of the question, I don't think. Bo Nix in for the Denver Broncos, of course. Javonte Williams still in there. They did bring in the Notre Dame rookie as well, Audric Esme. I would expect him to be pretty good as well. I think he took just a bulk of the carries over there for Notre Dame, so I expect him to be a pretty solid producer. O-line should be pretty good. Receivers, return Sutton is the top guy. Not sure about the depth there. And Bo Nix, he played with a lot of different offensive coordinators. He didn't throw the ball downfield at Oregon. That doesn't mean he can't. It's just changing again, switching to the NFL, and not sure how strong, how above average, how high the ceiling is between all the pieces there. The run support, the offensive line, the receivers, what are defenses going to take away and what are you going to have left to work with? Run defense was number 32 last year, and it's not going to just improve overnight. Defense looks pretty bad overall, which is still strange to take into account when you consider, the Broncos, at least in my mind, have always been a pretty good defensive team. So overall, my playoff seeds shake out like this, and I rearranged these several times. I gave the Texans number 1 seed. I think they have the best chance to create some separation in their division. I put the Jets 2, although they do have a slightly easier schedule, arguably. It's all arguable who has the easiest schedule. But because they finished lower in their division last year when they struggled, should have an easier strength of schedule this year relative to how everyone else is expected to perform, right? 3rd, I put the Chiefs. 4th, I put the Ravens. Then I have Browns at 5, Dolphins at 6, and Chargers at 7. So I have the number 6 Dolphins going on the road to play the number 3 Chiefs in the first round. I do have the Chiefs advancing and surviving an offensive onslaught and being able to put enough points on the board and get stops and to challenge the offense there and to win and to advance to play the Texans. And I do have the Texans beating the Chiefs, creating enough problems, being able to cover up the receivers, to jam up the offensive line, which may be one of the few question areas again for the Kansas City Chiefs, and to create some problems. And I have the Texans then advancing to the conference finals. In the 7-2 matchup, it's the Jets hosting the Chargers, and I do have the Jets advancing. I think this is one of the better all-around teams. And then I have the Ravens and Browns in a division matchup in the 4-5 slot, and I have the Ravens advancing in that one in their home stadium. And the Ravens at the 4 slot, going on the road then to play in the Meadowlands and play the Jets. And I had a lot of problems from here on out. But I decided to advance the Ravens, although I could very well have the Jets as well. I have the Ravens winning on the road, though. More, I think, cohesiveness there. More youth, I think, there. And I think that they'll be able to, even though they've had more turnover this past year, the Jets have had some as well. I think they're better coached. And I do have the Ravens going on the road there and advancing to play the Texans in the conference championship. Although I had the Jets going all the way to the Super Bowl in my first iteration. But now I have the Ravens playing on the road at the Texans. And I do have the Texans beating the Ravens. And that was tough too. I juggled Texans, Ravens, Jets for a while. And of course, there's a chance that with as competitive as the East division is, that maybe the Jets don't even make the playoffs, especially with the Bills and the Dolphins in the mix. but I think the Jets could certainly make it. Obviously, the health of Aaron Rodgers is needed to do that, but should he be healthy and that offensive line sees a few upgrades? I mean, health is needed for any team to win the Super Bowl. How often are you watching the Super Bowl and you're like, oh yeah, this team has 2 key players out, so they're going to win it? That doesn't happen. You literally need to be healthy and have very few weaknesses and a lot of like elite areas to win the Super Bowl. That's literally what you need. Sometimes it's luck, like you can't predict it. So I ended up going with the Texans to make the Super Bowl, although Ravens and Jets I have tucked right in behind there. Chiefs, of course, in the mix. Then, of course, in the other division, I had a rematch, other conference, I had a rematch between the 49ers and the Lions, with the Lions coming out ahead. I don't feel super strongly about that, but I think they can get some pressure on Brock Purdy there, particularly if they get a nice pass rush opposite Aiden Hutchinson. I like that a little bit more than pressure on Jared Goff and better execution. I'd like to see more offensive depth at the receiver position, more options for Goff. That hasn't been a huge problem thus far, but we know that the 49ers have it. So I have Texans and Lions in the Super Bowl, and I'm not super thrilled about it. Because after I put some picks down, I reviewed other predictions and have seen that this is a fairly popular pick to put these two teams this far. And ultimately, I decided to go with the Texans winning the Super Bowl. And it's crazy, I think, to have the Jets, the Texans, or the Lions in the mix. 3 teams that haven't had success in a long time, or the Texans ever, to make it that far in their franchise history. But that's what I have right now. So again, my playoff teams in the AFC: 1 Texas, 2 Jets, 3 Chiefs, 4 Ravens. Those are my division winners. Then Browns, Dolphins, and Chargers, with the Texans advancing over the Ravens into the Super Bowl, with the Jets and the Chiefs power ranked in some order there in the mix as well. Out of the NFC, I have 49ers, Lions, Eagles, Falcons winning their divisions, with Packers, Cowboys, Bears taking up the rear. And I have the Lions over the 49ers going to the Super Bowl there. So they're going to win in California, then head to the Super Bowl at a rematch game there. And then I have my home state Lions, unfortunately, coming up just a bit flat. I like the Texans roster more. And I hope that's not the case. I'd love to see the Lions win the Super Bowl in my lifetime, in my father's lifetime. That would be fantastic. But as I'm sitting here and not picking on emotion, I'm going with the Houston Texans. And if I were going to make another pick, it would probably be the Lions. And then, quite frankly, I'm looking at the Jets. I'm still looking at the 49ers. Again, I still think it's such a waste of Shanahan's time here to constantly make the runs with the 49ers, not make the Super Bowl. I'm not the only one that thinks that, but I bet you just waiting for a novel to come out years in the future when he retires or moves on about how close they were year after year after year. But I think CJ Stroud could win, is lined up for an MVP and a Super Bowl this year, and actually completing one of these Cinderella type seasons. Big game tonight, obviously, opener, Kansas City Chiefs lining up, hosting the Baltimore Ravens. 3-point line, 47.5 over-unders. I see it here, and I expect the Chiefs to win and cover in a big one. And I think we're going to see some points in this. I would go over, but my first pick, NFL pick of the season, is the Chiefs to win. Thank you very much for listening. Enjoy.
All my blessings, all my blessings. All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a